best thing I've ever heard is in a meeting that I had really early in my career with Usher. And he said, dude, everyone's just making it up as they go along.
That's Mark Adams, a strategist, a digital transformation expert, and the creative brain behind some of the world's most iconic cultural movements.
I was in Hollywood for nearly 5 years. I swear to God, there's no amount of money you could pay me to be a famous person in the music industry or the film industry.
From spearheading innovation for over 100 global brands to working alongside superstars like Lady Gaga and David Guetta, Mark specializes in the art of making impossible ideas a reality.
With Gaga, we were basically trying to steal Madonna's position in culture. Frankly, Madonna had become a lazy leader. She wasn't really saying anything or doing anything. So we thought we can take her position in culture. And we did. And the way we did that was by...
In this episode of Applied Intelligence, we dive into the wild intersections of creativity, technology, and cultural transformation. Discover Mark's secret for spotting billion-dollar ideas.
A cell, when it gets to a certain size, the load-bearing capacity of that cell cannot take any more mass, and it will break into two cells. One of the best things about it's just this realization that you're always looking for where it's going to break next.
And his weird but brilliant system for maintaining discipline in a world designed to control you.
We would go to the guy where we'd buy all our booze and we'd say, we're going to give you money for you not to serve us booze for the next 5 days. If I want to marry it, I don't want to pay more for a room with a TV. I will pay more for a room without a TV.
Join us as we unpack the secrets to self-command, navigate the intersection of innovation and humanity, and reveal how mastering yourself can change everything.
Most of the pain in the world is self-hatred projected outwards. If you ask me what the Trump election is he identified a bunch of people who didn't have self-command at the right times in their lives. They're fucking angry about it, and they hate externally now, when really they hate it.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Applied Intelligence podcast. Today I have an amazing guest, an amazing friend as well, Mark Adams, on the podcast. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy.
The way I love to start my show is I ask this question to everyone, which is, if there was an autobiography of your life and it had 5 chapters,
Whoa.
What would the chapter titles of each chapter be in your autobiography?
Whoa. Chapter 5 would be Disgraced Death. Because I fully intend to die in a utterly disgraceful way. I just don't know how yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure it out. Dubai is a good place to figure it out. The first one would be Thank God for Mum, because I have a wonderful dad who's one of the smartest guys in the world. But I also have a mum who's got the kind of spiritual intelligence.
Okay.
Right? And it's that classic, like, divine mother. I think my dad gave me a lot of get it done, and that was good. And my mum gave me a lot of love. And then I guess the second chapter would be ADHD, kind of realizing that when you get to your teenage years and you're just realizing that, like, you're a bit different. And then the third one would be electronic music. Because by completely committing, and obviously we're in the studio here, like just being obsessed with electronic music was the only reason I ended up doing anything. It was never about business or money. And I guess that leads to the fourth chapter would be where we are now, which would be what I refer to as kind of the new world. It's a new world for me, like being in the Middle East, traveling. I'm going to be in India next week. I was in Pakistan last week. Like for me, that is by far... This is the most exciting period of my life, just because I'm just being immersed in so many new things. And yes, I'm very grateful for that.
So you've worked with so many incredible brands, so many incredible celebrities. When you're working with all these crazy people...
Yeah, they are crazy as well.
And, you have this past as well, where you've gone through so much struggle, so much learning, so many ups and downs.
Yeah.
How do you take all of that and work with such high-profile people who, seemingly from the outside in, it looks like they have their shit together. But, when you get to know them and when you understand how human they are, everyone's got issues and problems. So how do you take that learning and knowledge that you've had in yourself and then apply it to your work?
I think the best thing I've ever heard is in a meeting that I had really early in my career with Usher. And he said, dude, everyone's just making it up as they go along. And that is so liberating. Because they really are. Like, nobody... Honestly, I am almost down to the point where, like, I like to think I'm a strategist in some ways. And we all like to think that. But sometimes I think not having a strategy and being honest about it is the strategy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, honestly to God, one of the things I noticed, when I was in Hollywood for nearly 5 years, 6 years, I swear to God, I would not... There's no amount of money you could pay me to be a famous person in the music industry or the film industry. Like, it's a mind destroying journey, and it mostly damages you more than it does anything else. So I think if you're like anyone listening to this who like really wants to be famous, like, trust me, you don't. You don't.
Yeah. So let's dive into that deeper, making it up as you go along and not necessarily always having a strategy for everything.
Yeah.
I think when we live in at least in a business world where everyone expects you to have a plan, everyone expects you to have a plan on a page, a strategy document, a mission statement, all this stuff.
Yes.
And you've been doing it day in, day out, especially for, companies that have existed for, decades.
Yeah.
The strategy that you had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you can't keep reapplying that right now.
Yeah.
So how do you think about, or what do you think the essential qualities that a leader needs to have to drive digital transformation within a company today?
Yeah. I think this is kind of if you think about business in so many ways, and I think Silicon Valley is a really good example of this, because Silicon Valley has somewhat of the kind of artistry of the right brain, but it also has the kind of fundamentals of business on the left-hand side of the brain. It's the same in Hollywood. People are, first and foremost, they like to think of themselves as artistically, imbued with something. But on the other hand, it's a big business. And so one of the things I noticed was that maybe what the left brain tries to do, which is, impose order on the world, right? It's okay to do that, but I think there needs to be a pretty deep exploratory right brain phase where you get to go, right, we're just going to try this. Like with Lady Gaga, no one said, oh yeah, we're going to create this thing called the Little Monsters. Like, we did one post saying you Little Monsters, and people went nuts, and we went, oh, maybe we should call it that, so we're always kind of testing the fence, right? Yeah. Like, everyone's just saying, you came up with the Little Monsters, and the junior intern person in social media just typed it one time, and that was the answer, So I think the right brain is really good from an artistic point of view of, like, I would call it like low cost, low investment testing. Just fucking testing, like reiterating, testing. And then the left brain goes, aha, I've seen the 5 things that work. Now I'm going to go deeper.
Measuring this all out is, where a lot of companies go wrong, right? Yeah. So, like, in terms of making investments in innovation hubs or innovation centers, etc.
Yeah.
So many people will just throw money at this thing, have a very short expectation for when it's going to deliver ROI, but you don't just create value because you had a whiteboard session, right?
Yes.
So how do you kind of coach people to think about innovation specifically, not just as a thing that you do as part of a planning cycle or an annual training cycle, but a muscle that you develop so that you can do it at the right time when the opportunity or like the market signal is there to do it?
Yeah. Well, you nailed it with market signal. I mean, I think in a way, if you think about that difference between the right and the left brain again, like I've probably got it here, like I probably wrote it on a sticky note somewhere, but only, this is my ADHD brain, but when you really look at it, there's something a little bit spiritual about innovation.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like potentially just going to sound nonsense, but I really believe this. The thing about trying to create something from zero, right? Like something that is unmanifest that becomes manifest.
Yep.
Is ultimately you can hang your hat of what you're trying to do on any peg you like. But eventually, once you've experienced enough trauma and pain of getting it wrong, you're going to start to hang your hat on human needs. And the beautiful thing about human needs is it doesn't matter. I have a need for things and you might have a need for different things, but actually underneath, it's the same human need, right? So there's something really universal about human needs. And I think when a company, I've seen it, we've all seen it, right? When it's like, we're going to put things into the world and we're going to do this, and you're like, you're fucked. It's not going to work. But when people start with, okay, we're really trying to find human need, and the bigger the need, the more pain, in a way, the bigger the business opportunity. And so you end up with this quite interesting thought, which is kind of Lord of the Rings, right? It's like Gandalf says to the other bad wizard guy, you don't understand. Only compassion can create. So only understanding somebody else's unmet need can create something that's worth creating. And so that's kind of that synthesis between the left brain, like business world, and the right brain, art world. That people needed that catharsis, they needed to see that, they needed to hear that, they needed to... So I kind of always come back to that, and I think, I wish I'd learned that earlier. I spent so long luxuriating in ideas that I thought were great, and there was no human need for them. They might have been really good ideas, but there just was no human need for them. And all innovation that fails is kind of the same.
For sure. And there's so many people, building so many hammers, but there's no nails to hammer those nails.
Completely.
When you're thinking about all these product companies, software companies, etc., that create all this software or create all of these new products, and it's essentially just a different color, a different use case, but no necessary market or problem.
Yeah.
We kind of get lost in the wind in terms of why are we actually making new for the sake of making new rather than approaching a problem, right?
Totally.
So what's your advice to coach people out of that mentality of growth or innovation for innovation's sake?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you make that shift into asking that problem or asking yourself, what is the problem that I'm actually trying to solve?
I'll give you a really strange one because we're sitting in a music studio right now.
It's a lovely vision. It is a great opportunity to film.
And you can apply this to business, but people would say this wasn't business, but these guys now are multi-millionaires, so they did very well. So I was part of the journey of an amazing electronic music EDM act called Above and Beyond, right? Above and Beyond, they get paid regularly £1 million a show now.
Okay.
Right? Now, when they were kind of coming through, their genre of music was quite emotional. It was actually songwriting, even though it was EDM.
Yeah.
And so when we went in to see them, we were like, okay, and they're up against David Guetta and all these other people who are,
Huge people. Yeah.
huge. David Guetta was also my client, so it was quite interesting. I kind of was playing both sides. But what you started to realise was that when electronic music, or EDM as the US call it, when it really exploded, maybe 10 years ago now, maybe more, it was all about a kind of arms race of scale. It was literally bigger lasers, bigger screens, more fire on stage. It was, and actually interestingly, because these shows were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the audience was actually getting further and further away because they wanted more pyrotechnics and stuff. So in one way, the scale was creating a lack of intimacy.
Interesting.
And so Above and Beyond, their whole MO was, we don't write electronic music. We write acoustic songs that we feel are nourishing or sometimes heartbreaking or say things that human beings need to hear and give catharsis and are about and are stories that will weave into people's lives. And then if we really, really love it, we'll do a dance remix of it and release it.
Amazing. It kind of and this is completely unrelated example, but relevant in many ways. I think it was Schindler lifts. Were getting a lot of complaints about how slow the lifts were going down.
Wow.
So instead of making lifts faster, you know what they did? They put mirrors inside of lifts.
Wow.
So people, instead of, thinking about the time that they were spending inside of a lift doing nothing, so 30 seconds, whatever the time is, they spent that time emotionally engaging with themselves by looking in the mirror.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
How much does a mirror cost to install in a lift versus re-engineering the entire thing to make it faster, right? So sometimes it's literally thinking about who is the user or who is my customer here? How can I improve that experience? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a multi-million-dollar investment. It could be as simple as putting a mirror into a lift.
Completely.
But that goes back to connecting with your end user from a human point of view and improving that experience. So, and connecting with them.
I love what you said there, because we always assume that better, faster, cheaper is the way. And unfortunately, as innovation and marketing people, we ourselves desire that in our partners and our but if I decide to get the QE to America, I've deliberately decided not to get the fast route. I am going on a completely different vector or a completely different dimension of what's valuable to me.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I think all brands have at least one other dimension that if they were really thinking about human need, they would go, and what's the version of it that isn't about our main thing? You know? So like Volvo as a great example. Volvo, if I was Volvo, I would be like, this is not a car brand about flashy stuff, it's about safety.
Yep.
Could Volvo expand their portfolio of products, or at least test the market to see if home security systems would work for them? I think they could. And the only way you'd get that insight is by going, God, you know what? People don't really trust this and this, and actually home security is a serious thing for people, because this is the network effect of your loved ones. You're not even doing it for you. You're doing it for the people you love.
Exactly.
And then you start thinking, where else do you feel like you want to look after people you love? And like, it just, these things only occur when you think in that kind of human need dimension.
Amazing. So you've spearheaded digital transformation for over 100 brands. What frameworks and processes, if I'm going to flip the switch and talk about the boring stuff.
No, I'm only kidding.
But what frameworks and processes do you come in and apply to make the stakeholders understand, how you're going to drive that transformation?
That's a great question. The biggest learning I've had about transformation, digital innovation, anything, is that it is not a technological transformation at all. It is more like, literally, it is more like being a therapist than it is like being an engineer.
Change therapy.
Right, exactly. Like the therapy that I go for, because I go for therapy, is probably the most instructive lesson that I then pass on to everyone else. It's like, I'm fucked up, and then you're fucked up in a different way, but
if only your therapist knew what you were doing.
Oh, totally. And the thing about I think the thing about transformation as a general idea is that there's almost 7 stages of grief that you've got to go through. Like, you quite literally have to kind of, I always jokingly say, you have to kind of like immolate yourself, right? That like incredible image of the Buddhist monk on fire during the Vietnam War that had lit himself up. Like, there's something almost that level of commitment. Like, I call it locking in. It's this idea that you just burn the bridge behind you. We can't. And that's where, coming back to your point about hubs, incubators, accelerators and stuff, that's where they go wrong, because they build something that's so ingrained in the mothership's kind of antibodies that eventually those antibodies will kill it. Whereas the ones that really work have managed to almost, like, the way I would say it is, speedboats off the mothership. They're not even attached to the mothership.
Right.
They're just speedboats doing their own thing with their own autonomy, allowed to make their own mistakes. Sure, there's a board above them that sees how things are going and gives go, no-go decisions on more funding. But they're not subject to the natural immunity or antibodies of the bigger organization, because that will kill everything in the end. And it's very sad. I've seen it so many times. It's like, actually, like, I'm not saying it's like Hollywood level sad, but when you've dedicated yourself to something and you realize the futility of it afterwards was never going to work, purely because of the dynamics of the human relationships involved and the need for the mothership to keep control, and you start to kind of realize there's something really tragic about that.
So I think this is related to culture, right? And so how do you coach a company through that cultural transformation that needs to go hand in hand with the digital change transformation that is happening concurrently?
That's it. And you nailed it. In the end, I actually would argue that all transformation is cultural transformation, basically. Like, even if you look at the, I kind of refer to this as the double helix of culture and technology, right? So let's say Napster, because my first investor was Sean Parker, right? He's a very strange and interesting guy. And
do you remember Winamp?
Of course. I had the best visualizations.
Yeah.
It was like Winamp visualizer. Oh my god.
Yeah, I felt like a DJ.
That is
like amazing.
that is literally old school, bro. I love that. That was the era of fake IDs and stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you look at peer-to-peer file sharing as a concept, what was really happening there? Yeah, technologically, there was the ability to share that, to kill kind of the music industry in some respect with the convenience of not having to pay and the speed of being able to just do it instantly. But really, the only thing that powered all of that technology wasn't the pipes. It was what was going through the pipes, that those things were of value.
Yes.
Now, even though they weren't necessarily, they were of identity value, but not necessarily, but if people could get the identity value without having to pay the economic market rate, they would.
Yes.
So we kind of end up with this really interesting thing, which I refer to as cultural capital. And I think that before an organization embarks on, you know, a transformation journey of any kind, I really do believe there needs to be the right cultural capital present within that network. And that probably will involve hiring some people from the outside who have had different experiences. It will probably involve, usually it tends to involve a fairly visionary CEO or chief innovation officer who is like, I'm going to suffer. Basically, I'm going to suffer immeasurably for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
But we're going to get there. And you can almost judge whether the cultural capital is there or not. And if it's there, you should seriously start to think about the strategy that will get you into that transformation journey. But until it's there, I think there's actually there's almost like there should be an expression for like reverse innovation, because people who do something and it explodes in their face never try it again. It's almost like the rat experiment, when you give the rat a nut when it presses the lever and then you switch it and then the rat gets electrocuted and the rat just goes in the corner, doesn't do anything ever again.
Yeah.
And so that learned helplessness comes when you try something and it doesn't work. It doesn't just put you back to where you were before, it puts you further back. So in a way, getting the cultural and the mindset of the organization ready is as much, it's like being an elite sports person. Like, you've got to have the mindset. Otherwise, the first hit you take, you're going to go, oh, I'm never doing this again. And then you see everybody just collapses, and they need to be ready psychologically.
Who do you think's doing this well?
I was very lucky to be part of a period of time where a dear friend of mine, Lubomira Roche, she was at L'Oreal. She was the chief digital officer. So she was driving that digital transformation, and like 2015 onwards, 2016 onwards. And I think that in terms of a large, I mean, we're talking a huge company here, that chief digital office team, and it's now run by another friend called Asmita, they have it should go down in like legend, what they've managed to do at L'Oreal. Like, they have managed to turn one of the biggest behemoths of a company into this incredibly like agile, like it's just a different energy. And I hate to say this, I shouldn't really say this, but you almost like feel kind of sorry for the competition. Not so much now. I think they might have lost it a little bit because things have flattened a little bit. But at one point it was like, oh my God, I would not want to be a Clinique. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know?
No, but, and you know, having spoken to some people who formerly worked at L'Oreal as well, like a commercial person at a CPG, which is essentially what L'Oreal is having to learn agile, having to learn digital process management, having to work with digital product managers, and on top of their regular operational day-to-day P&L management and brand tracking and sales operations and all that sort of stuff. This is a completely different skill set that you know, rank and file members of a team are having to learn and pick up and execute against, which is very unique, I would say, within the CPG sector. So thank you for sharing that.
No, I've got to tip my hat to the L'Oreal organization for that one. Like, you know, they are relentless. Well, they really are relentless. Yeah.
Social media.
Yes.
It's played an amazing role in your career so far. You've seen it evolved from the very beginning. How do you think it's evolved, firstly, and where do you think it's headed?
I mentioned that Sean Parker was my first investor, and I remember the first ever time we got drunk together. It was at the Peninsula Hotel in LA.
Okay.
It was a wild night. And we got into the conversation about network effects.
Yep.
And I think if there's one thing that Hollywood knows a bit about, Silicon Valley knows a lot about, and Madison Avenue knows nothing about, it's the power of network effects. I mean, down to the point where I would now say that my view of network effects is borderline cult. Okay. Like, I would, if I really unleashed what I honestly think about network effects, like, your network effects are your destiny as a human being. Like, I moved, there's a great story of people after the New Orleans hurricane.
Yep.
Hurricane Katrina. And they moved them to different places afterwards because obviously they couldn't live there. And they said to people afterwards, like, how do you feel? They're like, Hurricane Katrina was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. Because I left a network
Yep.
that had a gravity well that was sucking me down. And I got to go somewhere else and create my own network effects with my own, very consciously. And so this is the fascinating thing. I mean, almost to the point where I'm pretty sure that an AI could look at your network effects and say, this was literally what will happen to you in your life, right? Wow. I really believe that. And I think it's the same with so, you know, coming back to social media, you know, Sean said something wonderful. I mean, we were about 4 a.m. at this point, but he said, look, don't get it confused. The internet is a very simple thing. It's an interconnected set of networks. And there's only 2 things to remember about that. Number 1, networks create network effects. Some are the positive, you know.
Yep.
I think some are negative. QAnon, anti-vax, like, you know.
Yeah.
It's not a moral thing, but they create network effects, and those network effects can be disproportionately powerful as regards to the size of the network. So the network doesn't even need to be big to have a dramatically large network effect.
Yes.
And then the second thing that he just, so obvious now, but he's like, don't forget that this internet thing was the first media in the history of the world that was not invented with advertisers in mind. We have built an artificial media buying layer on top of the authentic internet. The authentic internet was never designed to have an ad break. TV, radio, cinema, everything was like, when are the ads going to be? Oh, before the film. Oh, they're going to happen that was part of the teleology. Not so with the internet. The internet was not designed that way. And so what he said to me was, look, new algorithms will come, new platforms will come. In the end, it's just as simple as this. They're just networks with algorithmic feeds on top. And so actually, once I realized that, I realized they're all the same. Like, I honestly don't see TikTok and Instagram as different platforms. They're just the internet.
Yep.
They have different algorithms. Yep. They have different behaviors. But as far as I'm concerned, they're just, I want to know, where can I find the networks I'm looking for, not what are the platforms. I feel like that's a tactical level, and it's not, you don't get to be strategic until you start saying, the network I'm looking for is this one.
Amazing. I think about the internet as a giant pivot table.
Oh, yeah.
In the sense that there's different tables of data.
Yes.
And there's zeros and ones. You just got to define which table you're looking for and what data you're looking for.
That's it.
And then find what you need.
That's it.
Now, what's happening is this thing called AI.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm just...
Yeah.
Is just making all of this stuff a lot more accessible.
Exactly.
It's enabling us to create value from the data a lot faster.
Yes.
And I think so many people are missing the point about
yes,
what you can actually do with this stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've actually been doing all of this stuff for a very long time.
Completely.
We have a new interface, which is chat, amazing, and it's talking back to us, very cool, but it's not that new.
Totally.
How do you kind of educate people about AI, and how do you think it's really going to change marketing outside of it's going to make us faster to do marketing actions?
Yeah. I always think of AI as a game, you know, that card game you play when you were a kid, Snap.
Yeah.
Or I think Uno is like, like Snap is like Uno's like the branded Snap.
Yep.
So really, I mean, I was really unlucky enough to start an AI company with my brother 8 years ago. And I remember being like, right, search the internet for dogs. And literally, it's impossible to remember, like, the stupidity of the answers was hilarious. You'd get like a kettle, a monkey, a fish, like, and then all you have to do is just train it. Go no, 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 and essentially there's something very Platonic in the sense of like Plato's world of the forms, right? It's almost like the AI has to understand something at the Jungian level of subconscious, like the collective subconscious. It's like this is the defining feature of a dog. And at Plato's cave, he said, how does a kid know that 120 different breeds of dog, that some are massive, some are tiny? How does a kid even know that they're all a dog? Because the concept of a dog exists in the world of the forms, which is what Jung was talking about, the collective subconscious. Alan Moore refers to it as the idea space. It's the space in the unmanifest, right? I think the best way to think about AI is to think about things in that type of primal understanding, and then realize that AI is right now really best at saying, find me all of those. Cool. Now find me all the things that meet 3 of those criteria, but not the 4th. Cool. Now find me all. That's it. It's really kind of, it's almost mathematically definitional. You know, it's almost like find me things that meet 75% of that criteria. Boom, there they are. Find me things that meet 0%. Do you know what I mean? So all you can do is just cut different Platonic ideas against one another and see where the conflicts or the synergies arrive. And I think that's a fascinating moment, especially for, you know, consumer insights, because you're now starting to actually understand, like, what makes this cultural network different from that cultural network. And I think the holy grail will be, do we see a world in which this cultural network will merge or combine, or in some way, will these two cultural networks kind of like essentially have a baby? If you think about like K-pop, it's basically like boy band plus Korean, like,
yeah,
and that baby is a very powerful market force.
Yes.
So I think that's where it might go over the next 5 years, and that gets, for me personally, really exciting.
I love concentric circles.
Yes.
I like math, but anyway.
Yes.
But for me, it's how do you take all of these different elements, see where they actually overlap, whether that's different technologies. So I'm really into data clean rooms right now. I'm really into AI right now. I have a background in CPG.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that intersection of those 3 things and seeing that even though the space in between those circles might be very small,
Yes.
but the value could be extremely high. So how do you make people understand that all of these broad experiences that you've had in your career, that I've had in my career, and all these people have had, how do you get people to see that you need to layer value on value, or experience on experience, or your lived experience on top of my lived experience?
Yeah.
To create shared and common understanding of topics, issues,
Yeah.
which creates the empathy to understand problems, which then creates the ability to solve those problems,
Yeah.
which means value.
Yeah.
Somehow, right?
Nailed it. I think it comes back, think about the word culture. Why is culture, why is thinking about things in terms of networks a good way to think about everything? Like, really. Number one, networks are mathematical. They're computational. They have properties. They have density. They have velocity of growth or velocity of decay. They have essentially what we were talking about before, compatibility, overlaps or none. Thinking about things in terms of networks is quite a powerful unlock. And then secondly, when you think back to what are we, no one can give me a very, very useful definition of the word culture. But I think you don't need it. Just break it down to cultural networks. Because there's 2 things in that. Number one, they're not demographic or sociological in terms of like social demographic. If I speak to someone in the UK and I say, do you know John O'Groats? It's the place at the very top of the UK. The first thing they'll say is something about Land's End, which is at the very bottom of because in idea space, there's this link between John O'Groats and Land's End, but they are the most geographically separate places on the whole of the UK. So until we can start thinking, this is what I mean about thinking in culture, because you can't start to see what the associations are going to be In fact, they might be the absolute opposite of what you'd think in socio-demographics. In socio-demographics, you said John O'Groats and Land's End are opposites. There's dualities.
Yes.
In thinking in culture, you go, no, John O'Groats to Land's End is a famous route.
Yeah.
They are linked.
Wow.
So suddenly you start to see, fuck me. That, with Gaga, we were like, okay, we were basically trying to steal Madonna's position in culture, right?
Yeah.
But we noticed that the observation was that, frankly, Madonna had become a lazy leader. She wasn't really saying anything or doing anything. She was never at eye level with her audience. And so we thought we can take her position in culture, and we did. And the way we did that was by identifying 3 or 4 real networks that needed support, like what we call third generation feminism, LGBTQ, when that wasn't so much of a conversation. And we started, and all Gaga did all day on social was just give them nourishment, give them support, tell them you've got this. And by doing that, suddenly she was a platform. And that's what brands have kind of missed. Brands use the word platform to describe a creative idea.
Yep.
But it ain't a platform. It's not a platform.
Shifting gears to democratizing digitization.
Yeah.
What steps can companies kind of take in their efforts to become more inclusive and accessible when it comes to all this new wave of technology that's coming specifically?
I have a very controversial point on this, and this shows you that I'm getting older. We, as we always do, because this is the human condition, what human beings do is we throw the baby out with the bathwater every time. So when the Enlightenment came in Europe and the rationality principle became, we threw out all concepts of spirituality and religion. Now we're desperately unhappy, all on painkillers and antidepressants, and wondering why, and it's because there's no meaning to life, right? So we always go too far, and what we did with digital transformation was we started saying, we need 5 21-year-old TikTok experts, and maybe we can let go of that middle-aged kind of 50s kind of person. No, that person who's in their 50s and their 60s, that person has the institutional knowledge. Train them. Now, if they won't be trained, fine. But for the love of God, do not throw out your strategic powerhouses in favor of tactical kind of, I guess it would be kind of tricks and gimmicks.
Yeah.
You know? And how many brands have piled into a new platform thinking it's going to be the growth engine? And yeah, maybe it was for a bit, maybe it wasn't. But we have to keep a strategic, I guess it would be we have to keep our strategic cool. Like, innovation is not actually about rushing in.
Yeah.
It's about going, right, okay, do we have everything we need on the back line? Cool. Is the market need state there? Cool. Right, now let's test at a very cheap, iterative, kind of cyclical way, so that we're not really investing loads of money, we're just testing the fence with these speedboats. Okay, now we've learned, now we're a year in, now we know these 3, or we have a great hunch that these 3 need states could be the future of our business.
Just on your point about the 50-year-old with all that institutional knowledge,
Yeah.
to apply a mathematical principle to it, that person is already at 80%. They need the last 20%, which is retraining and investment in retraining, right? Whereas if you go with a bunch of 21-year-olds on TikTok,
Yeah.
they're at 20%.
Yes.
You need to train them 80%.
Oh my God, you nailed it.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we're just like, we'll just go with the cool people.
Yeah.
Because they're wearing,
Yeah.
cool clothes.
Yeah.
And they have a following on social media.
Yeah.
They might not understand our business process. They might not understand how we actually do things.
Completely.
And people just go with the shiny new thing rather than thinking long term about how they run their business and how they will run their business in the future.
Yeah.
So very cool.
That is, I think if you have people who have institutional knowledge, as you say, it's exponential.
Yeah.
Like think about compound interest. The concept of compounding is that Warren Buffett is rich because he's old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Martin Sorrell is rich because he's old. But that's not a bad thing. That's an amazing thing. He's been there and has built so many relationships of trust. I think the ultimate compound interest is trust. And to get rid of that compounding exponential, it's not a good idea.
So, what's the best piece of advice you can offer executives looking to embrace this transformation agenda?
I think it would be spend as much time on safari as you can. What I mean by that is, you could read about animals and think you understood them from a book, but you go to a wildlife park and you'll get it. And I think P&G are the masters of this. P&G really, they treat an insight as a sacred thing. Like, it's really a sacred thing to them. And sometimes someone at P&G may realise that, with air fresh, right? They realised that at the time, in the 50s and the 60s, ladies would clean their home. They weren't spraying it in every room. They'd just go in one room, in another room, because that was the cherry on the cake, right? And so there's a classic Clayton Christensen story where, he worked with McDonald's to try and find how to sell more milkshakes. And they tried every single claim, and then in one conversation, someone said, when I have my milkshake in the mornings, I never have time to have breakfast. I need to just drive through somewhere, grab something that's going to make me feel a bit less depressed about going to work and sitting in traffic for like an hour, and something that I can kind of essentially eat but drink at the same time without crashing my car. And so you just don't get that insight any other way than being in the wildlife park. And I think for me, like, coming back to Above and Beyond, literally they made this piece of music. It had beautiful breakdown in it, and it kind of went down all the way to like piano. And somebody on the comments said, at tag that time where the breakdown went down, life is really made of small moments like these. And we went, small moments. Think about that as the opposite of the David Guetta show, the Skrillex show. We were like, we're about small moments. So the whole brand became about this concept of group therapy and small moments and intimacy. Now, we still could pound it out, but the band would come on at the beginning and play live with no beats whatsoever for the first 3 or 4 songs, like it was Adele or something. And then it would build from there. But everyone else couldn't compete with that. Coming back to that dimensionality, right? If I get the QE2, it's because I don't want to get there faster. And if I go and see Above and Beyond, it's because I don't want to see the fireworks and lasers. I want to feel something that's deeper. And so I think that kind of just realizing that human needs are so multidimensional that you can kind of go in lots of directions and just explore that is quite fun.
One of the chapters in your autobiography was ADHD.
Yeah.
And throughout this conversation and throughout knowing you, Mark, I can see how the ability of putting so many different pieces together in this jigsaw that is life, business opportunities, plays in your mind.
Yeah.
How do you think ADHD is played to be a superpower of yours in the work that you do?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it has also been an unfathomable curve. I think that the one thing that my observation of ADHD within people I know and within myself is that you were saying earlier about market opportunities being maybe the space or the overlap between two seemingly not related, I would call them networks or spheres of something, of culture. And I think almost if you think about culture, it is a biological word, right? It literally means to culture cells, literally means to allow them to break down and form new molecules. Right?
Yeah.
So what you end up with is a cell, when it gets to a certain size, the load-bearing capacity of that cell cannot take any more mass, and it will break into 2 cells. Right? That is the essence of human evolution and survival, right? And it's the same with anything. Like, think about, just because we're in the studio, electronic music. You've got EDM, you've got hardcore techno, you've got drum and bass and hip hop, you've got, so these things will break down. And I think one of the best things about ADHD is just this realization that you're always looking for where it's going to break next. You're like, and I consider those, in sports terminology, you would describe those as breaks in the game. And in cultural terminology or business terminology, they are breaks in the opportunity map. So when something goes, I'll give you an example, when the beauty industry gets big enough that suddenly, under the mass of that conversation, there's a breakaway of people saying, fuck this. We don't want to see size 0 models. We want real beauty. And one brand, Dove, and I've still got the can line up there, jumps in on that and goes, we're with you. And uses that quite small, nascent, new community to go to filter their message back into the bigger community. They win. And so essentially with ADHD, you're just constantly kind of, I don't know, you're kind of just constantly wondering where the next break in the game is going to be in culture. And it's exhausting and also quite exhilarating.
So the next question is about productivity and you getting the stuff that you need to get done.
Yeah.
How do you do that with ADHD?
Yeah. So I actually gave a TED talk about this many years ago, which I'm a little bit embarrassed about now because, yeah. So my brother and I, we really struggled with trying to make ourselves do the things that we knew we should do. And we were both studying law. And I remember we ended up sending articles and legal ideas to each other because we both had to write essays. And one of the things we became obsessed with is this concept of contracting with yourself. So creating a scenario like, and I think this might be $1 trillion business opportunity, genuinely. I think if you look at the unmet needs of human beings right now in 2024, I think the most inarticulated, unmanifested, unmet need is that human beings have self-command issues. So in a sense, everybody is ADHD now, in a way, because we are bombarded with, and we're only beginning to kind of scratch the surface, and the shopping conspiracy's out now on Netflix. We're only beginning to understand just how much we're in the, let's call it, in the blue corner. It's me and my Headspace app trying to stay cool and do the things I need to do. And in the red corner, it's like every data scientist in the world with the might of the biggest corporations on earth. You're fucked. Like, I'm in Dubai now, but even here, if I really wanted to, shouldn't say this, I could, with a couple of clicks of a button, if I was so inclined, which I'm not, I could order a bottle of vodka, a prostitute, and all the worst food you can imagine. And do you know what I mean? Now, that is not good. That is frictionless. It's never been more frictionless to fuck yourself over. And so I think we are desperately seeking a self-command technique or strategy. So my brother and I basically just decided to invent it. So my brother ended up going to Harvard on a full scholarship. The way he went there was that he wrote an essay about contracting with yourself whilst locked in a room for 72 hours. So under the conditions of being contracting with himself, and I had the key and I would only let him out when the essay was finished. So we're not as extreme as that anymore. But for example, I don't control any of my own money. You heard me earlier. Yeah. Right? I had to phone my assistant to get another card that he's put a bit of money on for me. Because if I control my own money, I'm going to buy more of these, right?
Yeah.
So literally, I almost feel like, and I think more people than just ADHD people can kind of relate to this.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the worst thing you can do? Many, many bad things. If you harm other people, that's morality. But if you harm yourself, that's ethics. And I think that a lot of the contracts we make with ourselves and then break, they are the things that actually are the most tragic things in our lives. And that anger, if you ask me what the Trump election is he identified a bunch of people who didn't have self-command at the right times in their lives. They're fucking angry about it, and they hate externally now when really they hate themselves.
Internal. Yep.
And most of the pain in the world is self-hatred projected outwards. So my brother and I thought, well, this is a pretty formidable foe. If you don't, this is a dragon that will literally eat you. So we have to go kill it. And we really went extremely hardcore into that system. But I don't think any of the things that happened would have happened if it wasn't for that. So still to this day, like, I want an Apple Pay, I want a credit card, that cannot buy alcohol after midnight. Like if I go to Marriott, I don't want to pay more for a room with a TV. I will pay more for a room without a TV.
Yep.
And this concept flows so against the grain of liberal capitalism. By the way, I'm a liberal and a capitalist. But it flows so much. We used to say to my brother and I lived in the same house with a bunch of other lads, and we would go down to the lovely guy who ran the shop downstairs where we'd buy all our booze, and we'd say, we're going to give you money for you not to serve us booze for the next 5 days. And he'd be like, but what do you want in return? We'd be like, no, here's the money.
Yes.
Don't serve us. Right. But this concept doesn't make any sense in our world right now, but it does from an unmet needs point of view. Because so many people are their own worst enemy. Me too.
There's I just heard a story about a Japanese restaurant that refused service to somebody because they had, so a bunch of Americans go into this Japanese restaurant, they see empty tables. And they're like, can we get a table, please? And the Matcha D says, sorry, we can't serve you today. And they're like, but you have you have tables available. And they're like, no, but if I gave you that table, our chefs couldn't give you the experience that we're known for.
That's beautiful. Pre-commitment.
Yeah. So for them to meet the
lovely.
Expectation of their existing customers
Yes.
is more important than just putting a couple of extra covers on for a night.
Love that.
So that concept does not exist.
That's right.
Does not exist in the West.
It does not exist in the West, and that is part of the reason why, in my humble opinion, the West is in the until the West can learn to lock in and pre-commit to things and have the will. And one way to find a lot of will is to have absolutely no other option but that. So I seek in many instances to give myself no other option. Like I've told everyone I'm going to do a live show, like where I present but also play music at the same time. I have until February to design that live show, but it's being promoted right now as a live show. That's what I want.
Yep.
I want to have I want to be backed into a corner where I either die or achieve it.
Yeah.
And one of the problems, and I was a constitutional human rights lawyer. I'm a committed liberal, but our conception of liberalism has to evolve to take on the idea that we cannot just be subject to. We need to have a self-defense mechanism against the subtlety of the modern state of nature, because the modern state of nature plays a very cool trick on you. It basically says, you forgot. You must have. You put on weight because you. It's like, no, you provided me with all the ability to do this and kept me in a state that meant I was probably going to press the red button and keep fucking myself over. And so I think, honestly to God, it sounds quite conspiratorial, but the more you look at the system and you think about what we do, the more you realize how companies have big data on people, and like the system is designed very cleverly. It's like, oh, you forgot to opt out. Oh, you charged again, right? Like, so, and coming back to those network effects, unless you take pretty extreme action, the network effect of the world, of the modern state of nature, is you will be poor, unhealthy, and unhappy.
Wow. For me, it's really understanding what you can really do about that, right?
Yeah.
Personally, sharing this knowledge and sharing the stories from friends, and thinking about what little contribution that I can make in the short period of time that I have on the face of this world is very important.
Yes.
Right? So for me, this comes down to contribution.
Yes. Love.
And compassion, love, empathy.
Yeah.
All of these things that we're not necessarily taught about anymore. We don't even have a language for this when it comes to education, when it comes to social life.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's critical that everyone just does more, but of the right thing rather than the thing that you're expected to do by the system.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the way you piece these jigsaw puzzles together to create this cultural change, because this, essentially, if we look at the direction that the world is heading politically, from a climate change point of view, from a social point of view, not everything's bright.
No.
What technology is enabling us to do, incredible.
Yeah.
But as humans, as people, as culture, we need to also drive in that direction as well. I think it's easier to do this when you have scale and power, and it's great when institutions, governments, all of these people kind of sway in that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a responsibility that people who have influence kind of go that way. So
Definitely. I love the way you say that.
yeah, because otherwise,
Yeah.
I have kids
Yeah.
who hopefully are going to have kids one day as well, and we want to see everyone succeed for a long-term future, not just all these short-term gains. And this is the trap of
Trap. And think about a trap. What is a trap? A trap requires the willing participation of the victim in a state when they are not lucid enough to see the consequences. And the modern state of nature, the modern world, is, if I'm going to be brutal, it's a trap. The whole fucking game is a trap. That sounds like but I really, the more you study this, like Thomas Schelling, who was a Nobel laureate in economics, he wrote an article about this in the 70s, talking about what he called unilateral contract formation. He said, if the technological cultural progress, which they referred to then as a future shock, right? Too much happening, too fast, too exponential. If that continues and the human being cannot evolve, which can't, we are going to be completely out of our depth in even understanding how the traps are laid. Like, ask your mum and dad how cloud computing works and where their data is. They don't understand what a Linux server is. So now you've got this situation where like 1% of the population can even have an idea about. This is why every human being in the world has had to explain to some older uncle or whatever that actually, no, that's fake news, and right? Because now we literally have asymmetrical warfare that is designed to get your lower self in the driving seat so that you fuck yourself, and then you've got no one else to blame, as if you were never injected with that thing that made your lower self become dominant, right? It's like it's like if I give you like LSD and you go out in the street and pull your clothes off and go crazy, then they go, oh, it's gone crazy. I think it's that clever. And the old state of nature, Hobbes' state of nature, was supposed to be nasty, brutish and short because we were to fear one another. That's okay. I think we did a good enough job of getting laws and policies and ideas where Dubai is a great example. Nobody fears each other here. It's the safest place in the world.
Yep.
So what's the new modern state of nature? Where's the new concern? It's like all good empires, it's become so subtle. You have to really know your shit to even see it. It's fascinating. And I don't say this out of love. I don't say this out of like, I don't want this to be true, but it is an observation that if I'm honest, I have to say is true. And I think a reckoning will come. Like Oxford English Dictionary word of the year last year was goblin mode. The concept that Gen Z have of locking themselves in their house and being the worst version of themselves, not even getting changed, not brushing their teeth, eating shit, vegging out and doom scrolling, right? Oxford English Dictionary word of the year this year was, I think it was slop, meaning the digital content that's created by AI at scale that's just of no nourishing value. Or brain rot. It was brain rot. It was between slop and brain rot. So that literally the Oxford English Dictionary word of the year that describes 2024 is brain rot. Now, when you've had goblin mode followed by brain rot, it's time to start saying, where's the state of nature gone now? Where is the enemy? Where's the attack coming from? And the clever thing is, the attack isn't on you, it's through you on your critical self.
So Mark, is your answer to this regulation of social media?
I can see a situation in 1,000 years or a couple of 100 years where, first of all, verification of like passport verified social media accounts, 100%. Like, again, these are all network effects, 13 different network effects. One of them is personal identity.
Yes.
So you create an adverse or a reverse network effect, negative network effect, when personal identity isn't built into the system. That's why I would never, I might type something underneath someone's thing and say, fuck you. I'd never say it to their face. Just smack me in the face.
Yeah.
Right? So we need personal ID verified social media platforms. The worry I have now isn't about governments. The worry I have now is about corporations. Corporations are now more powerful and more dangerous than governments. Governments have to fucking get their act together. They have to move a lot faster. They have to bring in a lot of different types of minds that they don't have. But in the end, as Hobbes would say, the Leviathan must exist. There must be a biggest gang on the block that's scarier than all the little gangs, right?
No.
And that should be the government. It should never be a company that owes quarterly reports to shareholders. That is look at the film Alien. In Alien, there's one company. It's just called The Company, Wayland Corporation, right? That's the most nightmarish vision of the future. Like, we're in Dubai right now. It's not a democracy, but it's a very benevolent place in many regards.
Yep.
And so the checks and balances that you're going to have in even what is essentially a dictatorship are stronger than you ever have in even the most well-meaning company.
Yeah.
Because the purpose of the company is to return shareholder value.
So Australia's just banned
Good on them. Couldn't be
social
happier.
media for under 16-year-olds, which is
Brilliant.
quite an interesting move. But surely the evidence is there that this stuff is rewiring brains in a very bizarre way, which we don't know what the impacts of this will be in 10, 15, 20, 50 years time from now. So, no, I certainly hear you.
Sean Parker and Mark Zuckerberg had a really big, like almost physical level altercation about this, about a year after I started. And that was it. Like, that was what it was about. It was about centralization versus decentralization. What are we trying to build here? And Sean Parker, madman though he is, believed in the original principles of the internet. He believed in the things like the Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace. Quite extreme, the Burning Man kind of, although even that's been taken over by the libertarian argument now. But there's something, the next 20 years, this is why my brother and I started something called the Digital Leadership Council, which is about like, how do we get people to fight for the digital freedoms that we did have and we could have, but we probably won't have if we don't fight.
Wow. Where do you learn all this stuff? Or how do you learn all this stuff? Which was actually going to be my next question. What's the book out of your many, many books that you gift the most to your friends?
By the way, just on our point that we were talking about earlier, this is literally high-level philosophy about choice over time and how it's a fundamental feature of the human being that we are so fucking flawed that when you measure, if you ask someone in an MRI to think about themselves now, lots of their brain lights up. You ask someone in an MRI to think about themselves in the month, a little bit of their brain lights. Ask themselves to think about themselves in a year, none of their brain lights up. So we have, coming back to networks, right? We have barely any connectedness with even ourselves in the future, yet we know we will become that person. And so therefore, can we think about how we're so selfish, we're preference maximizing in the moment, right? We are so preference maximizing that we cannot even perceive a link between ourselves now and ourselves in a year.
That's what you say.
And that's the modern state of nature. The modern state of nature is designed to play on that myopia. Oh, you want a credit card? Yeah. Oh, you want another drink? Yeah. Yeah, try this. Yeah. In 1 year, you're fucked and you don't know how. It's fascinating. Anyway, the book that I give to everyone is this. The guy's an absolute genius. He is Bruce Mal. He's my favorite, he's a designer, but he doesn't really design. He's a thinker.
Okay.
And this is called M24, and it's basically the 24 principles that will change the world. And principle number 1 is begin with fact-based optimism. To undertake the challenges we face today, we have no choice but to be optimistic. Like he refers to despair as a luxury. He's like, if you indulge in despair is a luxury good. Like, get out the way. It's quite fascinating.
Super cool.
He's badass.
Bruce now.
Bruce Mao, yeah.
Okay, MT24.
I'm going to get you there.
Mark, it's been a pleasure having
Dude,
you
what?
on this show.
Absolute pleasure.
Tell me how people can reach out to you if they want to find out more.
I mean, because I'm a geriatric millennial, and for the reasons we talked about a bit earlier, I don't mess with any social media whatsoever. Even though everybody says I've got to and I should, and it's not worth it to me. It's not worth the brain rot. But the one platform, genuinely, that I do think I get quite a lot of nourishment from is LinkedIn.
Okay.
I know it's a sad thing to say, but I'm really active on it. So yeah, if anyone messages me on that, I will definitely hit them back.
Super cool. Thank you for having me in your home. Thank you for having me in your studio. It's been lovely to catch up with you. Love to see you.
You too,
and thank you
brother.
for being here on the show.
And keep doing what you're doing, because honestly, it's sick. I reached out to you because I watched a couple of the podcasts, and yeah, I never even thought I'd be able to be on one. But I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Dude, that was sick. That was fun, man.
That's good.